M&A doesn't just test your operations, it tests your brand. And when it comes to the transition, every message matters. Internally, externally, online, offline, all of it matters. That's why today we're going to talk with Erin Gordon. She's the founder of Savvy. She helps brands through some of those most messy transitions, which of course includes M&A, and in true leaders list fashion, she has been through it herself. You're going to learn a ton from Erin. My name's Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list.
Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. Erin Gordon, welcome to the leaders list.
Nice to meet you, Bryon.
So, Erin, I'm thrilled to have you on because I think you're going to be able to hit a lot of the important points for our listeners, because a lot of them have interest in acquiring other firms or potentially being acquired. So there's all kinds of post-merger integration questions they might have. But one of the big questions is, how do you handle your brand after you go through that process? And ironically enough, you are the CEO of Savvy Partner, but you're also the CEO of Fisher through an acquisition. And so I just think you're going to have a lot of great stuff for us. I'm going to go ahead and kick off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and the firm and what you guys do.
Sure, happy to. So I started my career as a web developer, and I started my company in 2012, I believe, and as Savvy Partner. And so we started working in web development, obviously my forte, and then we expanded our services into digital marketing. We ended up becoming marketing partners with large franchises and agencies, which is how I met Fisher Agency. We partnered with them, and I just fell in love with the owner, Mary Fisher. We're really good friends. I was just on the phone with her still. She made me an offer. She wanted to retire. She made me an offer to buy her out and acquire the company. So we did a slow roll. We started in 2020, and she retired 2 years ago now.
That's awesome. And so you guys you're both in Jacksonville, Florida. Were you white labeling? Was Savvy white labeling for them, or did you guys go in as partners?
No, we were basically contractors to her company. We did digital marketing mostly for her company.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And so this kind of is reminiscent of everybody's talking about the silver tsunami, right? You know, there's a whole bevy of companies out there and leaders who don't necessarily have an immediate person to hand off the company to, and so they start looking for who's the right partner. And to her credit, she identified you. What was that discussion like? Because you had how long had you had Savvy at that point?
I think it was around 7, 8 years. But
yeah.
To her, I was a baby. You know, I'm half her age, and she was in business for 30 years when she asked me. So it was an interesting conversation. At first, I was not interested. You know, running one company is hard, as I'm sure most of your listeners know. Running a company is very hard. So, acquiring a second was not what I envisioned for my life. But, the more we talked through concerns, she agreed to stay on and help with the transition. And so it ended up being a great thing for my life. I learned so much from her. She's a great mentor to me. She has longevity. She's seen 3 recessions. And I learned a lot about traditional marketing that happened, before I was even born. She calls it commercial advertising back then. And so I got to acquire a bunch of education on top of the business.
That's awesome. I mean, what a great, there's oftentimes people look at, somebody in that position and go, well, I'm really just acquiring it for the account the accounts or the staff, but how smart of you to recognize that basically you're getting a mentor and educator at the same time, to see something that you might not see, a different perspective.
I think that, I mean, I would say it was probably a better education than my college education.
That's funny. And so when you looked at that situation, certainly your partner decided that she wanted to get out of the business, but were there strategic assets in her business that you didn't have, and vice versa, that you felt like you were going to strengthen your company or both companies by merging?
Yeah, so we actually decided on what's called a MIPA, a membership interest purchase agreement. So I end up merging my company with hers, taking over as CEO, and then slowly buying her out. This was kind of like an earnout, but also had stakes. We had a set goal, and this allowed me to learn from her, and she was able to stay on to transition. So we actually started the merger and acquisition as Fisher Agency, because, she had a stronger brand locally. And then, as I finished the acquisition 2 years ago, I was able to, start switching back over to Savvy Partner Branding. And that is not an ideal situation. Usually the acquirer has the brand, and the larger brand that acquires the smaller brand, and in this case it was flipped. So in other situations they advise you against this because it creates strains on your brands, and it does heavily, but we are blessed that we have both, and we've been able to carry both.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. When you went through that process, you knew you were going to leave it separate so that you could do the earnout. Did you always have intention of bringing Fisher into Savvy and making Savvy the master brand? What was your mindset when you started the process versus where you are today?
I was, when I started, it was like losing a baby. It's just, my baby is Savvy. And so, I had to leave my ego at the door and recognize what was right for the clients and for our team. And so, we made the decision to go full force on Fisher, make the transition, and then we'd be able to switch back.
Okay. All right. So any concern about your building up equity in Fisher? You already have equity in Fisher, in the brand, the name awareness. When did you decide? I know it was your baby, so of course you wanted to come back to Savvy. Yeah. But when do you decide that you're willing to give up that equity? Brand equity?
That's a good question. I think it's different for every customer. So we lead customers through this process all the time of rebrands. And, so we start with an audit with what do they have? What is the cost of making these decisions? And then we make a decision one way or the other. Do you start with this? What is the runway of that brand? And then what is the process of changing over? And sometimes it's been tricky. And in so many cases, you co-brand until it is fully phased out, which is kind of what we've done, is co-brand.
Okay. So you've kept both brands. You went through this process. When you went through the audit for yourself, what were the findings?
Sadly, she had a stronger brand because she'd been in business for 37 years. Her website alone had SEO equity that had longevity of inbound lead generation through SEO, which is one of the firm's prime services is SEO. I was already doing SEO. We had frameworks around it, but the longevity matters. And so we were able to capitalize on that. And that's why we made the decision to focus on that brand first.
Got it. Okay. And so now you've gone through that process. What about like the staff? And, so we understand your brand, you're already an expert in that. How did you and your partner work through some of the other post-merger integration issues? Or were there? Was it
once
just all magical and fantastic and
rainbows.
unicorns flying, rainbows and unicorns?
No, we actually did a speech one time together on we call it the good, bad, and the ugly of AMIPA because there were like 10 agencies that did this at the time. And I think we were the only one that actually went all the way through it. We made it. Like most of them end up, canceling their mergers pretty early on. So it's not the easiest road. And, there's a lot to be considered. We spent 2 years like walking through our like what ifs and what would happen if we end up canceling it, and the process of the burnout and her staying on and things like that. So it was a long road and it wasn't easy at times, but there were so many huge wins in between also.
And it's funny because I always talk about the fact that it's kind of like a marriage. I mean, when you go through this and you're partnering with another individual, you really need to understand each other, how you think, what your decisions are going to be. And the best way to get to that is to talk about it up front. Yes. So it sounds like you guys, did you have a marriage counselor or did you guys just naturally do that on your own?
We naturally did it on our own. The one good thing was we wanted the same thing for her to retire, right? And that way we were blessed. So many other mergers don't. And what I see after going through the experience is I don't think you can successfully do it unless both people have different sides of the business where they focus on. If you focus on the same road, you're not gonna make it.
So in other words, you felt like she had to have, what was her area versus your area? How did you split responsibilities is what you're saying?
Yeah, for the first year, 2 years, I focused solely on Savvy stuff and she focused solely on Fisher stuff. And then we slowly started, I started taking more over that stuff. So it was an easy transition in the beginning and it slowly got harder and harder. But I will tell you, our clients and our team, they don't care what you call the company, as long as they are safe and secure, and that's what matters the most to them.
Yeah. Did you have similar type of clients? Were you aligned in that regard? Size, demographic, business demographics?
I don't believe so. So we've mostly focused, on agencies and on other agencies and franchises at the time. And her clients were all mostly local in healthcare and professional services. But she had been in business so long, she's run the gamut. She's, worked for, Fisher Agency has done work for major hospitals like, Baptist and many other big organizations. So, it was really hard to mesh them well. And we still have a little bit of trouble with that because my expertise were in construction marketing and hers were in healthcare marketing. And so now we service both, but, marketing wise, you kind of have to flush that out.
Yeah, you got to specialize. The more you can specialize, the better off you'll be and better off your customers will be. Have you done that by creating true areas of expertise or centers of excellence around each one of those industry segments? Did you have to bifurcate your team a little bit?
Yes. So I had to go through HIPAA certification training, and I had to learn all about healthcare marketing. It's been a really long journey, but I'm also really grateful for it. And, vice versa. So our team had to kind of learn the other industries a lot better. Yeah.
Okay. So you've been at this for, you said about 5 years, right? Going through that transition.
Yeah, so I acquired Fisher in 2020. My original company started in 2012.
Right. So since 2020, you've been going through this merger. Now you're working toward building out Savvy. So give us a feel for what stage would you refer to this as? What growth stage do you think you're in? And then I'm curious about what's on your leaders list.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now our teams are fully merged and we are making the shift to Savvy Partner, although we carry Fisher still because of the longevity and people still come in through Fisher, but they're both co-branded websites now, so that people understand that Savvy owns Fisher, and we're still doing we're still known really well locally as Fisher Agency. So in fact, I just went to a new networking group here locally for a Christmas party, and I walk in, I don't know anyone, but they know the company really well. So, that has weight. And, so we kind of continue down this path. It's just a lot slower than you would originally think if you're going to buy a company that's bigger than your company.
It's funny. I remember I was at an agency when SBC, Southwestern Bell, was acquiring AT&T. And I remember the CMO saying, well, I could spend all of our money explaining who SBC is, or I could spend all of our money explaining why AT&T is not the same company anymore. And so It was like, you just make a strategic decision and then you stick with that, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just got to you make the decision for what's best for the company, and you just follow that road. And sometimes it takes longer than you expect.
Stay committed and focused. So you've done that. You're doing a great job. So let's talk about, like, what are the things on the leaders list? Like, what are the things that you're trying to prioritize that I'm sure are hard to keep at the top of the list?
Yeah, so we're making our shift into government marketing right now. We've done a number of marketing, government websites and marketing over the last few years. We really loved it. And so that's top of our list right now, is pushing farther into that. I'm working on my SAM certification right now in order to do more RFP bidding for government work. But we still are, we're still growing. Healthcare and construction are two big niches, and continuing down those paths as well. So that's kind of where we're at in 2026. That's what we're focused on. But I will tell you, it's been just so disruptive trying to stay focused this past year because of the AI algorithm changes in digital marketing and website stuff. We're having to basically do educational content for our team every single week. And I'm having to listen to podcasts constantly. I'm part of agency owner groups where we trade information as it comes out. And, in explaining this, educating ourselves, educating clients on what's happening in the market, and then continuing to evolve has been a super big challenge for all agencies this year, but especially for ones like ours that are heavy in web design and SEO.
Yeah, it's an entirely new world for agencies, and I know that's got to be challenging. So, as one of the things that's interesting about what you said is you are getting certification and you are working on AI. Do you ever feel like you are a bottleneck or a challenge for, is it always led by you, or do you bring other people along with you? I'm curious just what that process looks like.
I think my whole team really loves educating themselves, but I probably am the driver of it, because I have my hands in all different facets when they're really focused on client work, right? So I get a leg above them to be able to hear the information first, and then we talk about it and we make decisions together.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, like, I talk to people all the time about the fact that, CEOs oftentimes have the ability to work on the business versus in the business.
That's right.
And so that's a huge benefit. But you also have this, bimodal mindset where the whole key is how can you keep learning, but then transition to others, so that way you don't necessarily lose sight of the day to day. You can't have clients go, well, what happened to my person and where did they go and why aren't they focused on me anymore? So it's natural that happens in a smaller firm. And how many people do you guys have? Just so we can level set that for everyone.
We have 20 people, and
Yep.
We're actively hiring. So I'm hoping it's going to be a good year, and we're going to keep pushing into more website design. And we're also looking at making roles more encompassing so that it's not just single services, because with AI it's changing how an agency operates.
Yeah, and in what way is it changing it for Savvy?
Yeah, so clients expect faster turnaround because of AI, and they're also expecting that things aren't taking as long, aren't as hard, right? So we have to educate them on, we're still using foundational elements for how we build things, but we can move faster. But it also means that copywriting in itself, for example, is being taken away because the clients feel that they can do it themselves. So we're often like pushing back on those things, teaching them that we're not just building copy from AI, we're actually using our own frameworks for how we build copy, including brand storytelling and SEO, search optimized, AI optimized. Then we're writing the code behind that copy that is going to drive rankings. And so that's changing the structure of being more advisory level.
Yeah.
And so we're having to put more team members in those roles, educating them constantly, and then having less people on the back end that are fulfilling at times.
It's interesting because I kind of see it like a lot of organizations thought AI was going to solve a tremendous amount. They did huge cuts in staff, and then all of a sudden, then they start hiring back because they realized that they still needed the human element using AI. And certainly copywriting, storytelling, that's a great point. It's not necessarily discernment, as the discernment is not the strongest element of AI, right? It's just there to it loves any idea you have.
That's
so
right.
It's gonna, it just continues to add. Yes, and we love that's so smart. You're a genius. But in reality, you really have to have that wisdom and understanding of the craft to be able to make sure that the advice and counsel that it's giving you is right.
Right. And what's so interesting, my whole team was just talking about how a doctor was suing Google for it's referencing false information about them. And because it's confused, it's just pulling data and making an educated guess. And so, it's a wild road what the future looks like. And I was just reading about Tesla's, Grok AI, their AI Grok, that's wild. So it's going to be a bumpy road in 2026.
Yeah. Well, and constantly changing. So you're going to be at the forefront of that. You'll be thinking about it. But let's shift the conversation and talk a little bit about if our listeners are thinking about going through an M&A process, they're going to buy a firm or they're going to sell theirs, and they're going to go through that process. What are some of the things that should be on their list that they should be considering based on your experience in going through it?
Yeah, good question. So we often get brought into an M&A at the early stages to do an analysis and audit on the company that they're looking to purchase or merge with. And we are developing full analysis and strategy for them. So that is something that we do on a regular basis. But, top of those lists, if you want to know what we go through, we take a look at the brand equity, which was so interesting in my case because it was larger than mine. And then to the search volume, how much equity they have in search and digital assets, what creative assets they do have already, how the brands align and overlap. And then from that information, we develop overlapping personas and target audiences. And then we create a transition plan, which, is dependent on the goals of the owner.
Okay. So as you're going through that, you're thinking about financial impact of the brand when
Correct.
You were first talking about that. Okay. And then assets like SEO juice and as you're going through that process, do you have like a financial team on site, or do you partner with other groups as you go through and you develop the value of that asset, or is that based on some sort of a financial metric that the broker or the deal team is using?
So we do have partners that we recommend that we've worked with before. We love working with them and seeing good results from them. But in most PE, like private equity situations, they already have a team of those people. So we just become part of their team. We like my business name was built with the concept of being fluid into their company. And so that's kind of how we approach it.
Got it. Okay. And so what do you see most of the time when companies are going through that process? Where does it typically fall apart in terms of brand asset value and whether or not they finish the acquisition?
So many times that we get into this, I'll be honest, it usually becomes they didn't do enough research on the merger and acquisition. The egos get involved, or things were uncovered during the process. And so, if we have to get into a situation where we have to tell, which has happened, we have to tell them, there's malware, there's no brand assets, you would have to rebuild them. It's going to cost you X amount of dollars in order to rebuild that stuff. That's when things start falling apart, is when things get uncovered that they didn't know and are going to cost more than they expected.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because we do a lot of what we refer to as pre-due diligence, basically preparing organizations before they get to a point where they go, oh my gosh, somebody just presented an offer to me and I don't know if I should take it or not. Mm-hmm. The reality is I probably should have started 1, 2, 3 years before that to make sure that when opportunity knocks, they can respond. And so I've seen a lot come down to personalities, but that's mm-hmm. usually when they've already got their stuff in place, and then it just comes down to emotions, of the individual. But the pre-due diligence is so important. So I can see why people would bring you in early before they cut the deal, to be able to understand, if the assets they're buying are really there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of like an insurance policy, right? If you're going to spend that much money, why not just take, a week or two to make sure you know what you're getting yourselves into? And I actually like the way that OKRs, I don't know if you know what OKRs is, objectives and key results, likes how they break those things down, which is people, profit, process, and production. And so we fall under process and production usually, and sometimes people. And so those are the areas that we kind of uncover.
Do you find that having an alignment so you're talking about a business operating system with OKRs, could be EOS, could be Six Sigma, could be, there's Blue Ocean, could be a ton of different things. But how important do you think it is that they align on business operating system?
Could you explain your question?
Yeah, so like if you've got two companies that are both OKR based.
Okay. Yes.
Does that have a higher likelihood of going forward, or does it really matter if somebody says I'm EOS and somebody else says I'm OKRs? Do you still find common ground, or do you see that that's an issue for companies?
I think it just depends on the situation. Usually, I think the best mergers and acquisitions are actually when two parties are coming together and they're adding to what was already there. So another wing of business, another service line, or additional of the same. It's rare that it comes down to frameworks. And I think that the acquirer should take over the frameworks of the company, because you can't run in two different directions.
Yeah. So if you have a framework like OKRs and the company that's taking over, they're the ones that you need to make sure that everybody can transition to that business operating system.
Yeah, and we worked with OKRs training for a long time, which is the forefront of OKRs. And they actually, they're used to working within EOS models, and so they kind of overlap them.
Yeah, that's a whole different subject, but we've done a tremendous amount of work in both of those. And then what we always find is that if you are so doggedly focused on one or the other, there's holes and blind spots in both, and so you kind of have to understand where that occurs and how you can make up for where the framework leaves off. Yeah, that's natural.
Agreed. It is natural. Yeah. So,
yep.
But yeah, okay. It's always interesting.
Yeah, well, there's so many aspects of it, right? Because another point that you bring up is that it's people, and so it's one thing if I'm buying a product, a code base, a tool, a hard asset that I can put value against. It's another thing when it's a collection of people, clients. That's, it's harder to keep consistency in that. Am I going to be able to retain those assets,
yeah,
right?
That's right. It's funny to do a merger and think of people as assets, right? And that you're now going to have to lead a team that you know nothing about and didn't build. That's always a consideration, and we get asked to advise on how's the marketing department as a whole, but it's also enlightening, and it gives them the opportunity to grow their knowledge as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so Erin, I'm listening to this. I am ready to go do my, first acquisition. I'm going to buy another firm. What's the first thing that should be on my leaders list, based on your experience?
Yeah, I've looked at a couple of other agencies. I kind of have the bug. I want to do it again eventually. But
is that because the wound has scabbed over enough that it doesn't hurt as much as it did?
It's healed, yes. No, I think that once you figure out, how to do it, then it's a good way to grow as an agency. But I'll be honest, it needs to be a perfect situation, which is rare, a rare bird to find a perfect situation. But if I had to do it over again, I would find a smaller company that adds on like a service line or additional people that would be able to help my original team.
Yeah, so that means going through your own personal audit of your organization to identify strengths, weaknesses, and then understand the vision of what you want to create and how do I fill a hole by bringing in a different group, different skill set, different opportunity, basically.
I think you said it perfectly, Bryon. It's, we just went through traction. We have our goals for the year and starting to think about expanding into, for example, for us, it's government, more government work and how we bring in those people or those service lines in order to bolster that.
I love it. Erin Gordon, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, what you went through in your acquisition, and then how you've helped other people. It's been great.
You're welcome. It was really nice to meet you, and good luck to all the leaders.